Welcome to the Smarty Factory! In this video, we're going to show you exactly how we fill the Smarty 2.0, XL, and Kid model to achieve the optimal weight, resilience, mobility, durability, and squeezability. We're going to show you in detail our new and improved filling procedure. So if you want to get it unfilled, you can do it just like our team of full-time professionals. Or if you want to save all that trouble, get it pre-filled and take it out of the box, ready to roll, you know exactly how we make it. So awesome. Either way, let's get right into it. Hi, I'm Patrick Fulop, inventor of the Grappling SMARTY. And I'm really excited to bring you this video today because we've been perfecting this new method for almost a year. And that's because we really wanted to work out all the kinks before we documented this information for you. Now, a lot has changed since the launch of the original SMARTY in early 2021. Demand went through the roof since the launch of our new and improved SMARTY 2.0 and same design, larger SMARTY XL and smaller SMARTY Kid. So much so that we recently made the decision to discontinue all martial arts classes in our gym and convert our facility to a 100% dedicated SMARTY factory. Our changing rooms and showers are now full of storage for our materials. Our old instructor's office is now floor-to-ceiling racking for our SMARTY inventory. And our entire training floor has been converted to a production floor with work tables in the front, workstations throughout, shipping tables in the back, and even a dedicated shipping area in the back so we can get the SMARTYs ready and boxed up for our valued customers. Now, I'll be honest, as a martial arts school owner for more than the past decade, this was quite a difficult decision to make. But we really felt that based on the overwhelmingly positive feedback that we received from our customers, we owed it to the world to really focus on this 100% and take this company to its full potential. And it's actually just a more impactful way to fulfill our original mission, which has always been to help students of all levels improve faster through innovation. So it's with the innovation in mind that we didn't want to stop just at product design, but really wanted to find the best possible way to fill the Grappling SMARTY to achieve the best possible training experience and performance. So with the scientific method in mind, we practically tried everything. We tried to make it significantly heavier using rubber mulch, which would make shipping practically impossible, but also makes it very challenging to practice from bottom position given the extra weight. We also went the other extreme and tried to make it super light using polyfill only, which is also not very good because it feels like it's going to blow away in the wind and it feels like grappling with a giant teddy bear. Now, the method that we used to espouse, which is the fabric-only method, definitely delivers good results, but we found that we could achieve the very best possible performance using the pool noodle method. Specifically, the advantages of the noodle method are threefold. One being that it will reduce the overall weight of your SMARTY by about 20% compared to the fabric-only method, which is great specifically for practicing from bottom position. So you can balance it more easily on top of you, and you can reset it more easily after you execute submissions or sweeps. The second main advantage is increased resilience in the limbs, both initially and over time, which means it has increased spring in the knees and elbows, which is great for practicing grip fighting in the top position, as well as making it bounce around your guard from bottom position. And it just gives more spring and resistance in the limbs for submissions. And the third main advantage of the noodle method is improved bend location accuracy. Specifically, because the leg is supported with structural integrity all the way to the hip, the bend for hip extension will occur a little bit more in the hip. And because the arm is supported all the way to the shoulder, the bend for external rotation of the shoulder will occur more in the shoulder joint itself. Now, the one caveat is that the noodle method is significantly more challenging to execute. So we're going to get into exactly how to do it, and you can decide for yourself if you want to get it unfilled, do either the noodle or fabric method, or if you want to save all that trouble and get it pre-filled. Now, before we get into the details of what you need in terms of materials, tools, and techniques to execute this method, let's look at what we're going for and examine the final result. All right, so this is our factory model, which every filler is required to inspect before and after every fill to make sure our quality is consistent. And in case you're wondering, the white tape here helps delimitate the regions in which we use the polyfill strategically to help with product functionality. So in the feet, in the hands to make the extremities lighter, here around the shoulders, straps, and upper chest to help with various strangulations and mobility in the shoulders, top of the head and back of the head, which also helps with strangulations. Now, to really drive this home, we also prepared an overstuffed unit 2.0 and an understuffed unit 2.0. So you can really see how the quality of the fill impacts the final result and thereby the training experience. So let's get into our final QC inspection. Let's start by putting these guys on their back. All right, so I start with the extremities, polyfill in the hands and feet. So we want the polyfill to be compressed about 70 to 80%. Let's call it 75% in the extremities. We want it to feel full, but not overstuffed, especially in the toes. Here, tip of the toes, we want it to be nice and bouncy, completely filled, and tip of the heels as well, has to be completely filled. The foot should feel comfortable, it should still bend somewhat, and it should not be too strong. If we contrast that with the overstuffed unit, this one feels more like a strong shoe or even a boot, and that's going to be less comfortable to work with, especially as we get into our grips, trying to go into submissions, it feels too bulky. And conversely, if we go under, the foot that's understuffed, this is barely 50%, it just feels like an empty bag. You can collapse it completely, the feet go in. This really doesn't feel like a foot at all. Same thing for the hands. We're going for about 70 to 80% compression, and we want a nice bouncy tip of the fingers, as well as thumb bulge, completely filled, but not overstuffed. Moving on, limbs, legs, and arms is roughly the same procedure. We have a pool noodle going from the ankle all the way to the base of the thigh, and from the wrist all the way to the shoulder. We want the noodle to be completely filled with fabric all around, and we're still going for that same about 75% compression in the limb throughout. Now, very important, we don't want there to be a gap in the ankle. Anywhere, here, here, or in the wrist, the limb has to be completely filled all the way until the polyfill. We want the consistency to be even throughout, no knots, no gaps, no empty spots. And we want there to be a little bit of a give when we grab it. So when we grab with one hand, our thumb and fingers should sink about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch for a comfortable grip to move in to our techniques. If it's overstuffed, this one is about 95% compression, it's not gonna feel as comfortable when you grab, and it's gonna be hard to get a good grip. It's gonna feel more like grabbing a log, and that's gonna make it more challenging to get a good grip to proceed to your techniques and positions. And obviously for the under unit, it's gonna be very easy to get a good grip, but the limb doesn't have any structural integrity, and that's not gonna be fun to practice with either. So we check all 4 limbs throughout, make sure the compression is even, no knots, no gaps, no empty spots, and it's completely filled. Moving on, we're gonna look at the hip region. Now this is the region in which we add a little bit of polyfill, and this will feel different. Fabric here, polyfill here, more bouncy. This will help with the hip extension. Now at the end, we're gonna see also our warm-up procedure, which will help even more with mobility. But if our fill is adequate, already we should feel an ease of doing the hip extension, which will help us settle in our various top mount positions more comfortably. Moving on, torso. For this one, it's very simple. We're gonna stand on it and make sure that it can be load bearing. So it has to feel more like a human torso rather than a cushion or a pillow. Here, we want to step on the rib cage, belly, make sure the fill is consistent and able to support our weight. At the same time, we use noodle scraps in the torso to reduce waste and also reduce the overall weight of the Smarty. So we want to make sure those noodle scraps are not exposed and the torso is well lined with fabric throughout so it has a comfortable feel. Lastly, we're going to check the head and shoulders. So we sit it up, and this is the region in which there should be polyfill around the shoulders, straps, and upper chest, as well as back of the head and top of the head to help it keep a nice shape. We want there to be about 1 inch or so of polyfill throughout, well backed up with fabric underneath. So this will give a little bit of give and a little bit of a bounce, which will facilitate, one, the external rotation of the shoulder, which again, we're gonna see a little bit later in the warm-up, the strangle position here with the biceps in contact with the neck, as well as a little bit of give in the back of the head, which will help execute chest, back of the head, which will help execute various strangulations. If we contrast that with the overstuffed unit, There's no polyfill in this one, and you can see the shoulder does not move as well. The arms are a lot stiffer, and it's gonna be a lot harder to get in under the neck and compress the back of the head to execute various techniques. So that's not gonna be as pleasant of a training experience. And alternatively, the very sad understuffed unit will allow great mobility, but it feels like grappling with an empty bag or something, and it's not very pleasant as a training experience either. Lastly, the head and face, we want the chin to be nice and strong and able to take a punch, strong face even throughout, well filled. We want the head to be resilient thanks to the spine noodle, and we want the back to be well lined with fabric throughout, so again, it feels strong, and we cannot feel any exposed noodles. And that's what every approved Grappling SMARTY looks like. All right, now that you know what we're going for, here's how to do it. Let's start with materials. It all starts with the unfilled Grappling SMARTY, only available on grapplingsmarty.com. And depending on your choice of model, you will need different quantities of polyfill, rags or recycled fabric, as well as pool noodles. So we'll put the quantities here on the screen. You can screenshot it. And keep in mind that if you stick with the fabric-only method, you will need about 10 more pounds of fabric, more or less, depending on your choice of model. Now, for the polyfill or polyester stuffing, you could get that on Amazon, but we personally deal with a specialist supplier here in Canada. They're called hometex.ca. You can search for one near you by searching for buy polyester stuffing online and then your country, depending on where you're located. Now for pool noodles, it's very simple. You just want to visit your local brick and mortar pool supply store or buy them for your online pool supply store in your area. Here, the ones that we use are made by a company called Armacell, and we use the smaller 2.5-inch diameter ones, as well as the larger 3.5-inch diameter pool noodles. You also want to get them as long as possible, so you have more options in terms of cutting for using them in the limbs. The ones that we use here are 56 inches in length when we receive them. Now, regarding fabric, we definitely tried a lot of different things, and we've settled on colored fleece wipers is the product that we use. Our supplier here in Canada is called the ragfactory.ca. I know that in the States, there's a great website for similar products, which is called affordablewipers.com. And you can search in your own country for buy rags online and then your country. And that's, I think, the most effective way to go if you don't have the material on hand already. And the reason we've settled on fleece wipers specifically is because in our experience, it offers the optimal amount of fluffiness and compressibility. Originally, we tried mixed color wipers, but in that case, you get a bunch of different things like corduroy and khaki and sometimes some jeans, and that's not as easy to work with. And conversely, we also tried thinner materials such as t-shirt wipers or bedsheet wipers, and that, in our experience, doesn't offer as good of a final result because they compress a little bit too much, and it makes the end product of your SMARTY a little bit heavier. So again, in our experience, fleece is the best material to work with. Now, if you don't want to buy them pre-cut online, you might have that stuff lying around in your home, old clothes. You can empty your drawers and cut them up into rag-sized pieces to execute your filling. You might also be able to get some at your local thrift store. Sometimes they sell unwanted inventory by the pound. You might also have success in visiting your local tailors. They might want to give you or sell you their scraps. And another good idea is if you have an old worn out punching bag, you can reuse the insides to fill in the Grappling SMARTY. And lastly, if you have an old dumb dummy, as we call them, you can definitely sacrifice it. And I'm sure it will be happy to end its miserable existence to get a new life as a Grappling SMARTY. Next, tools. You will need a pair of scissors to open your package. If you employ the noodle method, you will need a measuring tape, marker, as well as box cutter to cut the noodles. You'll also need some form of tape to cover the rough part of the Velcro to make sure the polyfill doesn't get stuck into it. Here we have a bunch of soft Velcro strips or the loop part that we use to cover the hook part of the Velcro, but any type of tape can do as long as you cover it completely. Next, you might want to use some thin work gloves that offer good dexterity. This can help protect your hands against chafing on the inside of the seams of the Smarty. Most of our guys here are used to it, so they work barehanded, but you might want to protect your hands if you're doing this yourself, especially if you're not used to manual labor. And another optional tool is a baseball bat, which may be useful for the polyfill. We'll get into that in a moment. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, especially if you employ the noodle method, you will need some kind of stuffing tool. Now, the tool that's preferred by our team here is a sharpening steel rod. So that's the thing that you use in your kitchen to sharpen your kitchen knives. And we have some big ones here, is 14-inch, just the metal part, 22-inch total. And this will allow you to reach the extremity of the ankles as well as the wrist, especially as we start the filling of the noodle and the fabric around the noodle. It's important to be able to extend your reach that way. And this tool will also allow you to increase the compression more effortlessly. Alternatives is stuff that we've tried here in the factory is cut a ski in half, and that could also extend the reach. We've used plastic knives, plastic swords, and any contraption basically, which is a thin and long tool, which will allow you to increase your reach and get into those narrow spaces between the noodle and the skin of the Smarty to compress the fabric adequately. Now, if you don't have any of that, or you don't want to acquire those specific tools just for this job, it can be done also with a broomstick. So either for a mop or a broom, you unscrew the stick, and that could allow you to get into the extremity of the ankles and the wrists. It's just a little bit more bulky and harder to maneuver, but if that's all you have, it can get the job done. All right, now that we have everything we need, here's how we do it. Now, we definitely want to have a comfortable workstation with all our materials, tools, and everything that we'll need. Most of our guys prefer to work seated on the mat. Some of them use a small fabric packet as a stool. And some guys also prefer to work standing on a sturdy work table. So that's a matter of personal preference. Now, the other thing you'll need aside from space is also time. Most of our experienced fillers, once fully trained, can complete a unit in about 2 to 4 hours. That being said, when we hire new recruits for the position to grow our team, we don't do interviews, we do trial shifts, and we book a bunch of guys. We have a dedicated manager on site that's there to coach them and give them all the tips and tricks and supervise the work. And even so, not everybody is able to produce a satisfactory result within the allotted time. So we basically eliminate those who can't do the job or can't do it fast enough and keep only the best fillers. The good news is, if you're doing this for yourself, is that you only need to do it once or maybe a couple times. But given the fact that you're not a trained professional, you probably want to budget a little bit more time. So this could be a nice little weekend project if you're into that. So let's begin. We start by carefully cutting the plastic envelope and opening up the Smarty. We protect the sticky part of the Velcro with tape or a soft Velcro strip. We open it up and fluff it out. So we want to basically create some air and space within the arms and legs to make it looser and easier to fill. And then we're going to move on to the polyfill step in the hands and feet. Now, there's two ways to do this. We could do it by hand, or we can use the baseball bat technique. I'm going to show you both. For the hand technique, we want to take about 3 big scoops per foot. So we take 1 big scoop, we stick it in there. And what's really important throughout the filling process is to have opposing forces of 1 gripping hand and 1 stuffing hand. So we're going to start with the first scoop going into the toes and gripping the heel of the foot at the same time to achieve a nice amount of compression and get the polyfill all the way to the corners and the extremities of the toes. The second scoop will go right into the tips of the heel, and the third scoop will go in the middle of the foot to achieve a nice level of compression and bounciness in the foot, not overly compressed, but not collapsible either. If we want to use the baseball bat technique, it's quite similar, but we're going to put that scoop in there, and then we're going to wrap the limb around the bat and use the floor as the pushing force and pull down on the fabric around the baseball bat to achieve the compression in the extremity of the toes, the heels, and the center of the foot. Same thing for the hands. If you want to go by hand, big scoop, about 2 big scoops per hand. We want to get all the way to the tip of the fingers as well as all into the thumb bulge. So again, gripping, or the elbow in this case, and stuffing all the way to the hand, making sure we get it completely filled, not overly so, and not overly dense, but not under either, finding about 75% compression. Same technique for the other hand if you want to do it with the baseball bat, pushing straight down and making sure the hand is well filled with polyfill. Now you could forego the polyfill entirely and just use fabric in the hands and feet, especially if you're employing the pool noodle method, because the feet will stay up in the supine position. But we found that using polyfill in the extremities of the hands and feet makes those extremities a little bit lighter, which allows them to move faster, which is more interesting for grip fighting. Next comes the tricky part, which is starting the noodles in the legs as well as the arms. So it's going to be the same method for the legs and the arms. And we want to take our noodles, if we haven't already, we want to pre-cut them to the appropriate length. So here are the lengths of the different types of noodles that you'll need, depending on your choice of model. You want to cut them and be ready to stuff them in the legs and in the arms. So we start with the first leg. We get the noodle all the way to the extremity of the limb, so all the way to the ankle seam. And we want to hold it in place until it's appropriately locked in with fabric. And we want to be careful at this step because there's a tendency for an issue to arise, which is what we call the noodle pop issue. So if we're not careful about keeping the forward pressure onto the noodle by either using an external gripping hand or pressing it with our abdomen to keep the noodle at the extremity, it can have a tendency to extract out of the limb, especially as you extract your hand from the limb. So it's kind of pulling the noodle out. And what will happen in that case, it'll create a gap around the ankle, and the ankle is going to be too flimsy. So we don't want that to happen. And we definitely want to keep forward pressure on the noodle as we start the filling process all around the ankle and the shin. So we're going to take a nice thin piece of fabric, and it's a good idea to pre-sort our fabric into thinner, smaller, more malleable pieces and bigger pieces that we can use for the bigger areas of the Smarties, such as the thighs and the torso. So we take some nice, small, smooth pieces of fabric and insert them into the front of the shin. We can use our stuffing tool that becomes very useful at this step to reach the appropriate length and get all the way to the extremity to achieve the right level of compression. We want to build all around the noodle to make sure the noodle is not touching any side of the skin and it's completely covered so we don't have an exposed noodle. And we keep building in a spiral all around the leg while maintaining the noodle in place with our external gripping hand so the noodle does not pop on the extraction. As we stuff, we also want to be mindful of our gripping hand to have those opposing forces to achieve the adequate amount of compression, and switching to a gripping hand on the noodle on the extraction so it does not pop. Another important concept is we generally want to be stuffing the top part of the limb. So it's just easier to access and easier to see what we're doing if we're stuffing the part that's on top. When we want to get to the back, like the calf area, we want to turn the leg around so we can see what we're doing and keep on stuffing the top part. And we keep building in a spiral like so, all around the shin or lower part of the leg, all the way until we get to the knee. Now the knee is a little bit more tricky because it is kind of a bent area in the Smarty, but we want to be methodical into getting those small pieces of fabric all around the noodle. And it's noteworthy to mention that we don't want to overstuff the knee either. So sometimes you could have a tendency to want to fill out all the creases of that knee, and that is not necessary. Some creases will remain, which will allow proper mobility in the knee for flexion and extension. So we stuff the knee, and once we get past the knee, we can relax a little bit on our external gripping hand because the noodle pop is a lot less likely. It's kind of locked in place with the fabric. But that being said, we still want to be careful with that leg until we complete the lower half of the Smarty, so we don't want to throw it around or put any weight on it until we complete the full leg and all the way to the waist seam. And that's going to be when the lower half of the Smarty is going to be securely in place. So we keep building up the thigh. Now in the thigh, we definitely don't need the tool as much. We can just use our hand to stuff all around the noodle, making sure it's completely filled. There are no gaps, no empty spots, and no knots in the fabric. So we want to fluff it out and get it nice spread around the limb so we have a nice consistency and an adequate amount of compression. We're gonna reach all the way to the end of the thigh, right before the hip joint, and we're gonna switch to the other leg. Now, the only difference with the second leg is that now we have a completed leg to work around. We just wanna be careful with that leg and not bang it around or put any weight on it as we're filling the second leg, but the process will be exactly the same. Be careful of the noodle pop issue, maintain the grip on the noodle as you start it, and fill all around it evenly, smoothly, no gaps, no knots, no empty spots, and an adequate amount of compression throughout the leg all the way to the hip joint. Now, when we get to the hip, this is when we're gonna do the polyfill in the hip joint, so right at the intersection of where the hamstring and the glute would be. Now, there's two ways to do this. You can either make a little pouch of polyfill wrapped in fabric and insert that pouch in there, kind of a burrito shape or a small football shape, or you can also use two little balls of polyfill in that area, or we can also go free-handed and just put the polyfill in there and lock it with fabric after the fact. Now, for the buttocks, we want to use 100% fabric, and this is a good opportunity to use your rougher pieces of fabric. So waistbands, pockets, bigger pieces can go into the buttocks because we want the buttocks to be a little bit heavier so it'll be comfortable in the seated position. And the upper chest and shoulders will be a little bit lighter using noodle scraps and polyfill. So we keep filling the seat area all the way until the waist seam by appropriately packing the fabric in there. Now again, you don't need to worry about eliminating all the creases on the sides of the hips, but we do want it to be nicely filled so there are no gaps and no empty spots, and we want to make sure that the polyfill stays in the appropriate area that will facilitate mobility in the hips. Next, it's time to start the first arm. So the method is going to be very similar to the legs, with the exception that the noodle is a little bit smaller for the 2.0 and XL, given the smaller circumference of the arms. The Smarty Kid also, we employ small noodles in the legs because the limbs are also a little bit smaller and we can get a big noodle in there. But basically the same process. We make sure the noodle stays at the extremity. We fill all around it, always focusing on our gripping hand, controlling the extraction, filling the top part of the limb that we can actually see, and making sure our fill is consistent, going in a spiral all around, no knots, no gaps, no empty spots, and an even amount of compression throughout. It's very important to keep monitoring the part that you already did as you build it. So you want to QC yourself or do the quality control yourself, because it's quite challenging to go back and fill an earlier or more distal part of the limb once you're already further along. You can do it in some cases using the sharpening rod, so you can get past the existing filling and create a little gap, move stuff around, and compress stuff that's further down. But it's always preferable to build it systematically and appropriately as you move along. So we complete the first arm past the elbow all the way to the shoulder joint. There'll be a little bit of noodle left exposed. You fill that with fabric. Repeat the process with the second arm. Same thing, except you just have to be careful of your first arm and all the parts of the Smarty that are already built. You have to work around that. We get all the way to the shoulder joint as well. Adequate compression everywhere. All right, now that our 4 limbs are built, it's time to move on to the head. Now we employ a spine noodle, which will contribute to help the head stay more upright and increase the resilience of the neck. We want to start with the most distal part of the head and build our way to the most proximal part of the head, which is the neck. So we're going to start with the crown, a little bit of polyfill all around the top part of the head. This will help give it a nice shape. And then we want to start building the face from the forehead down to the nose and then the chin. We want to use fabric in the face because we want it to be a little bit stronger and able to take a nice punch. So we build the forehead, the face, pieces of fabric, well compressed, perhaps a little bit more compressed than you would do in the limbs. And we build all the way to the chin. The chin is perhaps the most important part because that's where you're going to punch. Either you practice striking or ground and pound. We want to get them all the way to the extremity of the chin. And a little trick of the trade in this case is that we want to get the pieces of fabric past that little seam that's in the chin, where the chin strap would be, and that'll help lock in the fabric in this area. So our face is completely built, at least a preliminary face. This is when we insert the noodle. We want the noodle to go all the way past the second seam or the higher seam in the back of the head. So that way it'll be well inserted in there and it will not have any risk of popping. Again, throughout the filling process of the head, we want to keep forward pressure on the noodle to make sure it stays in place, especially with the extraction. So we're going to either use our hand or pinch it with our elbow or press it against the inside of the Smarty so the spine noodle stays in place until we're finished with the head. So we get it nice and deep in there. And then we're going to keep building around the sides of the face, and we're going to build all around to lock the noodle in place. Then we're going to put some pieces of fabric, one or a few pieces of fabric behind the noodle to lock it in place with the rest of the fabric. And that's where we're going to insert the polyfill in the back of the head. Now the polyfill in the back of the head will help a little bit with compressibility in the back of the head. It will help keep its shape, and it will facilitate various strangulations, making space to create that lock. So we stuff the polyfill in there, making sure our head has a fully nice shape, using our tool if necessary for touch-ups, until we lock in the base of the neck and we're sure that the spine noodle will not move anymore. All right, and now that we've built the extremities, it's time to do the easier part, which is building the torso. We want to start by lining the front of the belly, the ribs, as well as the middle lower chest with a nice lining of fabric. So about 1 inch or so of nice pieces of fabric all around. So we have the fabric covering the exterior of the front of the torso. And that's when we want to insert our noodle scraps. Now here at the factory, we cut up all the leftover noodles from the limbs that we pre-cut, and we distribute them evenly in all of the torsos of our different models. This helps reduce our environmental impact because this foam that the noodles are made of is non-recyclable, so we definitely don't want to throw that away. Now, depending on the noodles that you bought and the model that you have, you might have more or less leftover noodles, but you definitely want to try to use all of them. It'll also contribute to lower the overall weight of your Smarty, which again improves the training experience. So we insert our noodle scraps in the center of the torso. We can mix them in with fabric as well. And then we're gonna keep building the sides and exterior and the back of the torso. To do this, we're gonna lay the Smarty on its side and fill the top part of the Smarty. Here, our gripping hand will change a little bit, so we definitely wanna grab a big chunk of vinyl to give ourselves a nice force to compress the fabric around the top exterior part of the torso. So we try to connect it to the fabric that's already there, build towards the belly and all the way to the armpit, around the ribs and around the back, stuffing one side completely. We turn it around, build the other side the same way, gripping and pushing. Here again, a tool is not necessary, but can be used for touch-ups whenever there's a further part that you're trying to access or a little gap you're trying to fill. So we fill the torso completely, all the way until the shoulders. Then we start with the polyfill around the shoulders. So here we want the polyfill to cover the entire shoulder girdle, towards the side and towards the back, a little bit on top where the traps would be, as well as in the upper chest area. This will help with shoulder mobility and various strangulations. So we want the polyfill to be on the exterior, about 1 inch or so deep, and backed up with fabric on the inside. So we want the shoulders to have kind of an exterior feeling of fluffiness, but not too compressible either. We still want to feel them strong and well backed up with fabric in the center. To finish the torso, we will put the Smarty in the turtle position, and this will give us a nice angle for compression, using gravity to compress the fabric all around the torso. And like we said earlier, we want the torso to be quite well compressed because it will be load bearing. So we want to stuff a lot of fabric in there, noodle scraps in the center, until we have difficulty closing the zipper. So the zipper tracks should be a little bit open before we attempt to close it up if there's enough fabric. And when we feel all around, it should feel nice and strong and well filled. To close up the zipper, here we want to be careful. Like any zipper, if you try to slide the slider up and the zipper track is open, especially if it's not easily closable, you could damage the zipper. So there's ways to repair it. We've done that in the past. But to be safe, you want to pinch your knees together until the zipper tracks are touching, and that's when you're going to slide the slider. You can also use your finger to push the fabric down to more comfortably slide the zipper all the way up. Once that's done, all that's left is to close the Velcro flap. To do that, you want to again have pushing and pulling forces, so your palm is going to push the soft part of the Velcro in, and obviously we take out the tape from the sticky part, and we overlap until the sticky part of the Velcro completely covers the soft part, center, top, and bottom. So we have a nice, clean looking Velcro strap that is well and securely closed. And that's how we fill the Grappling SMARTY. So here at the shop, our guys are required after every fill to do a quality control inspection to make sure everything looks nice. And they will then move on to weighing their unit. For this, we use the pretzel method. So the hands grab the legs, and that helps us balance it on top of our packaging scale. The advantage of this scale is that the reader is a little bit further away, so that allows us to read the weight while the SMARTY is on top of the scale. You could perhaps do it with a person scale, but the weight might be harder to read. In that case, the workaround would be to weigh yourself, then weigh yourself with the SMARTY, and then do the math to subtract and find out the exact weight of your finished SMARTY. Our guys would then tag their unit with their name, their unit number, the date, the final weight, as well as the time it took them to fill that unit. It will then be left in the center of the production area for final quality control inspection, and then be moved to the pre-filled inventory section ready for shipping. Now, before we ship them out, we also want to do a nice wipe down because there might be some dust particles from the fabric or the polyfill that gathers on the vinyl. So we want it to be nice and clean. Any light household cleaner will do, or any moist towelette or wipes. And we also want to do our special warm-up procedure, which we're going to show you right now. All right, so once the fill is complete, this is our special warm-up procedure that we execute before shipping. Now, if the fill is adequate, the need for a warm-up is minimal. But nevertheless, it will serve as a test of the SMARTY's mobility before we ship it out. So, very simple, 3 movements for the hips, 5 movements for the shoulders, and 1 for the neck. Starting with the hips, knees together, knees onto the chest, fetal position, with the heels onto the buttocks. So we're testing the hip flexion and the knee flexion. At this point, it's a good idea to test the knee extension as well, making sure we can reach a full extension. And then knees apart, and we're going to do the guard position. So knees apart, elbows in the center, and we're going to use our knees to press its knees onto the shoulders. So if you know anything about guard retention, you know how important it is to be able to bring our knees to our shoulders or armpits to have a tight guard. And we want our SMARTY to be able to do the same. So here, we want to make sure that the knees go far enough. Nice hip flexion. We're going to retest the knee flexion at the same time. Knee extension again, good flexibility. And next, we're going to test the hip extension. So here, because we have the polyfill strategically placed in the hip, it will naturally help with the hip extension. So reverse knee on belly position, and the foot should be able to comfortably reach the floor. Now, if we did not use any polyfill here, or if we need to loosen it up for whatever reason, we could just give some percussion here in the glute and base of the hamstring to create a bit of space, and this will help the foot reach the floor more comfortably. If we do a little bit of knee extension at the same time, we can reach even further to have more mobility in the hip. Same thing on the other side. Here, a little percussion, little extension, and we reach the floor with the foot. Next, for the shoulders, we're going to settle in our mount position past the guard, elbows together, and prayer position. We want the elbows to be able to touch each other and touch the rib cage. This is a very important defensive position once our guard has been passed, so we want our SMARTY to be able to execute it. Moving on, settle under the elbows, and we reach the cross position. So the first one is prayer, then cross, gently pressing the elbows to the outside to achieve roughly an 180-degree position. Now here, again, the polyfill in the shoulder will help, but if we're encountering a little bit of resistance, a little percussion here and here, and this will help achieve the cross position or double Americana. Moving on, arm bar. Here we want to test the extension of the elbow and even hyperextension to make sure we have a nice straight arm bar and even a little bit further. And we want the arm bar to be able to reach above head in a Superman armbar position. So shoulder mobility going upright. Here, pulling on the wrist, pressing on the elbow, and pushing the arm against the head straight up. Same thing on the other side. Here, armbar, hyperextension, and then pull on the wrist, push on the elbow, Superman armbar position. Next, the strangle position. We want the biceps to be able to touch the neck, like so. Again, if we encounter a little bit of resistance, a little massage in the upper chest, and like so, pulling on the thumb or wrist, pushing on the elbow, and we reach a nice strangle position with the biceps in contact with the neck, which will be important for various strangulations. Same thing on the other side, a little massage to be sure, pull and push, and we reach a comfortable strangle position. Lastly, for the shoulder is the Kimura position. So here we go up a little bit, we push the fingers down and pull the elbow up to be in line with the shoulder. Pushing gently fingers towards the floor, nice 90-degree position. And you can see the noodle here helps support the arm all the way until the shoulder to achieve a nice shoulder lock position for kimuras, omoplatas, and so on. Nice kimura position. Same thing on the other side. Here, pull the fingers down, reach around to the elbow, nice 90-degree position, and we gently bring the fingers to the floor to have a nice 90-degree position. Lastly, all that's left is the neck, so we sit it up, and we just want to make sure that we're able to slide into a nice, comfortable rear naked choke. So again, the fill will help with this, and the polyfill in the strategic places, back of the head, traps, and shoulders. If we need, we can do a little trap massage, like so, bang the front of the chest like so, loosen up the neck, and this should allow us to slide comfortably under the chin, get our secondary hand in place. There's enough space. We lock it up, fingers in place, and head, and we get a nice, satisfying squeeze. And that's how we get every single Smarty ready to roll. All right, and that's pretty much all there is to it. All that's left after this will be to enjoy your Grappling Smarty, train hard, and train smart. Now, if you have your Grappling Smarty already, I want to say thank you so much for your order. If you got it unfilled, good luck with the filling process. Feel free to rewatch parts of this video as needed. And if you got it pre-filled, hopefully this video has helped you appreciate the care and attention and craftsmanship that goes into making every single Grappling Smarty with love. And if you're yet to get your very own Grappling Smarty, well, we're very much looking forward to fulfilling your order only on GrapplingSmarty.com. Signing off, Patrick Fulop here at the Smarty Factory in Pointe Claire, West Island, Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Thank you very much for watching. Practice well. Woo! All right, that's another great video shoot in the books. You wouldn't believe the amount of planning, energy, and work it takes to get one of these videos done. So I gotta say a few thank yous. First off, thank you very much to our team of dedicated full-time Grappling Smarty fillers. We couldn't do it without them. The job they do is not easy. So these are very tough individuals and we appreciate their hard work. I gotta say thank you to my wife as well and business partner who stepped in since the close of our martial arts school as COO of Grappling Smarty and is handling most of the day-to-day operations, so hiring, shipping, quality control, facility design. She's been a great partner throughout this process. Helping out with the kids as well. Our daughters, Kira and Kayla, are now 1 and 3 years old, so they're definitely a handful, but we love them so much, and they're really ultimately the reason why we do what we do, is to try to provide a better life for them, and they deserve all the best. That being said, it's tiring to raise young kids and have a growing company like this. So I gotta say an extra thank you to my parents who have been babysitting our daughters for the past week, which has allowed me to finally get my head into this project and gather the necessary amount of energy and time to get this video shoot done. So thank you so much to my parents and my family. And lastly, thank you so much to you and all our customers. You're definitely our raison d'etre. We do this because we really enjoy getting all that feedback and those positive reviews and seeing how our product and what we do can really help practitioners improve that much faster. So thank you so much to all our customers, and congratulations on making this decision to invest in your training. It's been a pleasure making this video for you. Hope you've enjoyed, and thanks again for watching.